Hello Rog fans, and today on Rog Music we are discussing, is this the end of Ibanez? Circa 2017-18, the CITES Convention, which looks after endangered wood, decided that rosewood was an endangered species, and guitar makers everywhere were in a panic. Luckily people like Fender and Gibson and Jackson had some fair stock, so they were okay. But Ibanez started to panic because they don't actually make their own guitars really. They've got a Fujian factory does it for them. And before we could shake a stick at it, they started producing guitars with things like Jacktober and Panga Panga. Panga Panga? Is that an 80s hair metal band? What is that stuff? But what was interesting is the competition, ESP, Schecter, Jackson, etc., started to produce guitars that would normally have rosewood with ebony, usually Makassar ebony, but ebony fingerboards. And then we saw people like Schecter and ESP producing guitars with named pickups in, with ebony fingerboards, with special trims with titanium bits and bobs in, and stuff like that, for the same price that they used to sell a similar guitar with a rosewood fingerboard. But Ibanez didn't do that. Ibanez didn't adopt ebony, they adopted Panga Panga, Jacktober and this second-rate rubbish. But worse than that, and something that we've seen over the past 5 to 6 years, is that the quality of the wood that they're using is going downhill. So the two questions are, why didn't Ibanez adopt ebony as its standard fingerboard, which the competition did? And they're still to this day, Jackson and Schecter are producing some astonishing guitars for £600-700, $700-800 with ebony fingerboards and Seymour Duncan or bare knuckle pickups or Damasio's or something in. Really, really good guitars. Some of the Schecter ones even have sustainers in for that sort of money. Sustainers. Incredible guitars. Jackson have got some great soloists with ebony fingerboards, some great pickups in, and the old JT 580 trem and stuff. And what are Ibanez doing? They're producing cheap Indonesian guitars for that sort of money with second-rate wood in them and just average pickups. It was bad enough about 2005 to 2008 that they dropped the low Pro Edge trem. This was the first signifier that Ibanez could be in big trouble. The low Pro trem, so according to myth, was invented by guitar legend Mr. Steve Vai, hello sir, because when Ibanez invented the Edge trem, easily the second best locking trem in the universe, Steve, with his enormous plate hands, allegedly said, can you move the fine tuners back a bit, because when I'm playing, my hands on the fine tuners and it's detuning the guitar. So they invented the low Pro Edge, easily the best trem in the universe, by a huge margin. But around 2005-2008, they dropped it for his signature guitar. Now this was allegedly the guy who designed it because he couldn't cope with the standard Edge trem. So they dropped it and went for the cheaper to make model, not the cheaper model, the cheaper to manufacture model. And the reason it's cheaper to manufacture is the low Pro trem has a long bass, whereas the Edge trem has a short bass. That little bit of extra cost in metal is saved, but the quality of the metal is the same. So it is cheaper to make, but not a cheaper trem. And yet, they brought out the Genesis range. RG550 copies from the 80s, from the late 80s. Well, who asked for that? I mean, they've got the original neck joint, which is terrible. They've got the original V7, V8 pickups, which aren't exactly brilliant by today's standards. And they put the Edge trem in it, and it's made out of cheap wood. And it's really expensive. It's more than buying a genuine 1980s or even better early 90s RG550, which is made out of significantly higher quality wood and has got significantly better build quality because it was made in Japan. Now I say, we make the Genesis guitars in Japan. You do, but a friend of mine, good friend of mine, played a Genesis. I've seen a Genesis up close. The quality of the maple is shockingly poor for that money. It just isn't any good. Why are Ibanez putting cheap rubbish into all their guitars now? Pretty much. And look at the gem range. That's shocking. They brought in a a premium range, which is basically Indonesian PAP range, mostly with a horrific Z0 locking Z FPS trem, which excellent music shop Andertons did a brilliant video about that, where they tested all the top locking trims that were available at the time, and that ZFPS thing with the cam was terrible. It was just didn't stay in tune. That was a really expensive guitar again, because it's just. And they started to put that cheap crap all over the range, and it's just terrifying. I mean, they come with the premium gems. We're thinking, oh great, they're going to replace the 555 with something a little bit better, and they replaced it with lots of clones of earlier models with the rubbish ZFPS trem on it, made out of cheap wood, with most of them have got the wrong net radius. Some of them, they've all got the wrong fret wire, but they've got the pickups. And look at the BFP. It's just an appalling abomination compared to the original. It's just nasty, Why? The only one that was worth having was the 70 VSG, the seafoam green one, because that was the only premium gem with the correct trem on it, with the edge trem on. Didn't have the low pro, the edge trem, but that made a huge difference to the guitar, having the correct trem on it. And now they've got the new premium with an ebony fingerboard, which is extremely rare for Ibanez, which is a copy of the 7VWH. But I mean, it's just terrible, isn't it? I mean, why didn't they have ebony on the premium range RGs? And why is it when Ibanez put ebony on a guitar, they take all the bloody fret markers out? Look at the Iron Gear range. Look at some of the RGD range. You want anything in ebony on it, it's got no fret markers. Why? Because they're cutting costs. Are we seeing the end of Ibanez? When companies like Cort are producing better quality guitars, and the Cort and Samick factories basically make the premium gems, don't they? And the premium RGs and the premium Ibanez guitars and the Schecters and the ESPs and probably even some Fenders. Those factories have been making guitars for big name manufacturers for decades, and now Cort have managed to get their own market share. They're producing better quality guitars with the knowledge they've got from making them for the bigger manufacturers for less money. So are we seeing the end of Ibanez? As their endorsees drop and more oddbods come in, and they started adopting things like Panga and Jacktober as standard, inferior ZPFS trims, low quality woods pretty much across the entire board. Is this the end? Is this? I mean, they haven't innovated anything since they invented the world's first mass-produced 9-string. When they did the mass-produced 8-string, they dropped the ball again because you make the world's first mass-produced 8-string great. Schecter did the C8FR, the only 8-string by a mainstream manufacturer with a Floyd Rose on it, and it's a great guitar. When I asked one of the designers, a Toshino, will Ibanez put an edge trim or a low edge trim on the RG2228 or the RG8? They said, no, it's technically too difficult. I said, well, Schecter have done it and they're selling bucket loads of them, and it's not rubbish. But Tony McAlpine, an Ibanez artist, he had a low pro edge fitted on his signature 8-string, and it's great. They can do it, but they're just choosing to do it. And it just seems to me that there's more and more desperate cost saving and less innovation, where the other manufacturers have gone, okay, we can't use rose, we'll use ebony, we'll use Canadian hard drop maple, and then we'll get the customers in by putting titanium saddles and the trems and DiMarzio pickups, maybe stainless steel frets, ebony fingerboards, whatever it is. And Ibanez is just going, we'll just put cheap rubbish in and just keep making the same old things and hope for the best. Not a good situation. Comments down below, and don't forget, this isn't reality, it's YouTube.